once you get into the design space, you're not actually working for yourself, right? You're working for the world. So it teaches you humility. It teaches you not to take yourself very seriously. So therefore, I kind of grew into, I think, a professional that was concerned about the world.
Welcome to Creative Talkative with Ketki Tewary.
Yeah, we're creative and talkative. There's no stopping this. There's no topping this. Time to explain what's in our veins, what's in our minds. Take a peek into these lives. Yeah, we're creative and talkative. There's no stopping this. There's no topping this.
Today on Creative Talkative, we are getting talkative with Anando Dutta, whose creative career spans well over 3 decades. A graduate of NID, his work has made a mark in design, advertising, publishing, and media houses. He is currently the Dean of School of Design and Innovation at Atlas Skilltech University, where he molds young minds into successful future entrepreneurs in the design industry. His cool and calm vibe is quite contrasting to his vibrant personality. Mr. Anando Dutta, welcome to Creative Talkative.
Thank you.
And it's a great pleasure to have you, and you took the time out on a weekend to speak with us. So let me begin by asking you, what is your typical weekend like, or when you have a holiday, what is it that you do?
So first up, thank you for having me. I think it's great to talk about oneself once in a while. And weekends are essentially loose ends, right? You do everything on a weekend that you should not be doing. For starters, you sleep too much, you eat too much, you binge watch too much, and in between all that you also read, you catch up with friends, and socialize. So broadly that's what happens. So every weekend actually, I think for everybody, is always feels too short. Yeah, so that's kind of
that's how your weekend. So I would like to, for the benefit of those watching and listening, talk about my first interaction and impression of you. Okay, so you were told that we are looking for the design faculty, and then you go through my work, that paper which says this is what I did and that is what I did, and you say you've been a radio jockey, and I said yeah, and you said that's damn good, yeah, why don't we do a course on radio? And I think even the other person in the room was like, but we don't have a course like that, and you were like, so what, we already have people teaching design, so let's start with something, So I was like, it's a revolutionary person, like, ekdam izzat aur bhi badh gaya.
This relationship that you have with faculty is pretty much like any relationship that you have with anyone that you're working with. And if you're interviewing someone or you're working with someone, you know that there are certain things in that person that makes the person who he or she is. Now, you could have done a master's from London School of Economics, but at heart you will always be someone else.
Correct.
So that someone else is in the sparkle of your eye. Whatever feels good for you actually shows through. We can't therefore find it in a CV.
वो तो है.
हाँ. तो मैं जब पढ़ रहा था तो देखा अच्छा हाँ very good, art school, design school, ये college, वो college, ऐसा पढ़ा है, वैसा पढ़ा है. But at the end of the day, the joy that I sensed about that radio piece was tremendous. I thought that energy was great, and that's why I thought that if that is the significant piece that you bring to the table and you enjoy doing it, that's what you should do. So I don't know where to begin. So my father was part of the movies, part of the industry. Now he became part of the industry actually before I was even born. So he came to, I'll leave the previous years, But he came to Mumbai in the late 50s and became a part of the Bimal Roy script department. Those days, script was a department. It was not one individual.
Right.
And in that department, there were various people who were ideating together. It was not just a plot and a story, and which is so anyway, so he wrote his first film Anupama on his own.
Okay.
That was his first film as credit. So Anupama ke baad mein there were lots and lots of films. So there was Satyakam, Ashirwad, Anand, Mili, etc. His idealism to the film itself, and those were times when this was happening, right, in the movies. And while that was happening at home, we had a different kind of situation, right? You had all these very, very interesting people who were walking into the house. So all these guys, all these people with great eminence and with great abilities would be walking into the house and they were talking and poetry because dialogues were being written. So
Correct.
everybody's, कुछ शायरी यहाँ हो जा रहा है, कुछ बंगला में poetry हो रहा है, कुछ everything is happening. So that was another something that sort of made an impression on me. मैं होता तो क्या करता? How would I sort of say
Visualize this same thing.
How would I imagine this?
Correct.
What kind of props would I use? वगैरह वगैरह. And I think that kira was very important for me.
Of course.
And it propelled me to start to imagine the same stories retold in my own mind.
Your own
You know?
Let's talk a little bit about your decision to join NID.
That point in time, I was also playing cricket in Mumbai.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Serious, मतलब
Serious
पैसे
cricket.
मिलते थे क्रिकेट
अच्छा,
के लिए.
अच्छा,
हाँ,
like that,
नाम पेपर में आता था. I was also doing my BSc with zoology, maths and stats. It was a freak combination, right? So, and I liked these subjects.
Okay.
So like you raised your eyebrows exactly like that. Everybody raised. ये पागल क्या कर रहा था? मतलब. But I liked those subjects. And at some point within 3-4 months of doing those subjects in BSc, I found that इसका ना हमारे देश में कुछ होने वाला नहीं. So I gravitated towards other things.
Okay.
So getting into NID was a very interesting, is a very interesting transition. Like if you go from Mumbai to a place like this, which has this kind of architecture, this kind of sense of space,
Yeah.
where the walls are talking to you, the trees are talking to you, the people around you are so interesting. They're very different. Everybody is like they're in their own spaces, mavericks. When you start talking to people and sensing what people do, you automatically try and find some resonance of that creativity in yourself, and that begins to grow, and that
Correct.
begins to become something of a personality, or it begins to achieve a personality in some
It's
ways.
molding you as you are.
As
part
you
of
are.
that culture.
So that's what then begins to become like the individual that you want to become at some point. And then I got into very interesting projects, and that was then it was like a roller coaster. Once you get into the design space, you're not actually working for yourself, right? You're working for the world.
Yes.
So it teaches you humility. It teaches you not to take yourself very seriously. So therefore, I kind of grew into, I think, a professional that was concerned about the world. Also, some other things happened. Like, I was always curious about things. I was always wanting to know, if there's something new that I saw, I would always sort of gravitate towards it and say, अच्छा दिखाओ क्या हो रहा है? And then I would want to sort of take it apart and say, अच्छा इसको कैसे use करेंगे?
Yeah.
And so on. Some of this, of course, I think came from the filmmaking background, but some of it was like an
Your
automatic
natural
ability,
nature. Yeah.
nature.
Yeah.
So that also happened. So when I started working, my first thing was, of course, newspapers and magazines.
So this is advertising. Like you were in a traditional advertising agency.
No, before agencies.
Acha, before
When I
agencies.
graduated,
Huh.
I was working with newspapers and magazines.
Acha, like that. Okay.
Designing newspapers. So these were like the first magazines that ever were designed on computers. Don't know if it happens so easily now, but in those days, like I said, now you saw something and you said, okay, does this do this as well? Does this apparatus, which means does this computer do this as well? And you saw, ye bhi kar sakta hai, let's see what we can do with it. And then you took the next steps.
You started this trend of having a design studio.
Yeah, so so let's understand what a client means to a design studio and what a client means to an advertising agency. As a sort of sad story is that you end up doing everything the client asks you to do,
Yeah.
right? Most of the time. Some people break rules and some people do it differently, and those guys are obviously great agencies. But a design studio is a different guy,
Yeah.
right? So the design studio does not necessarily always do what the client asks you to do.
Correct.
Design did not necessarily only mean the prettiness of things, So for example, we did this huge story for Sony. Sony was coming back to India. This is in the mid-90s, I think. They were coming back to India and we were the studio handling it. So we actually got a special shade of Sony's color created as a laminate. That laminate का shade did not exist. So वो laminate का factory में जाकर laminate बनवाया.
बनवाया, हाँ.
Then that Sony shade का carpet was made. And that carpet had to be a certain kind of carpet which had a texture but did not lose that color. So the way in which that whole business was done had to ensure that we went through multiple samples to arrive at the right one. So now these are things that design studios do better. The target segments of people in the 90s are different from the people in the early 2000s.
Yeah, agree. Yeah.
Are very different now. Even we as people, our
We've changed.
Sundays in 1990s and now are very different.
Right.
The way we respond to our relationships with people and objects is different.
Different, yes.
Our levels of patience is different. Our levels of tolerance is different. The way we make conversation is different. We choose to listen or not listen very differently. So obviously whatever is being done from the advertising point of view also has to support this kind of transaction with media. Na?
Every day is a learning, whether you're traveling by local public transport or you are, traveling out of the city or, you've gone for a movie. Because you never know what it is that you will be required to create in the future. You can't say, my job is over now. Now I'm just going to Netflix and chill.
I think therefore research with us design types is about actually talking to people. And that begins to make a huge story to tell, nahin? Because it picks up the pulse of people. It could pick up the pulse of nature even, or animals or whatever it is. But it picks up the pulse, and that ability to pick that up is what makes a special designer, I think.
The creative process has become very different from what it was. Because you're creating something for people who's consuming the same kind of stuff online, who are, eating the same food, watching the same videos, watching the same reels. So what is the challenge then as a designer?
If everybody is going to be picking from the same Instagram piece, then obviously there is going to be a certain monotony in the replication process. So I think at some level, the stories that will get recognized and appreciated will be these stories which, even in Netflix, will be these stories which have these twists. Will have these conflicts which are new. The mold could be the same, but the way in which the conflict is enacted will be different.
Correct.
And that itself, when it gets resolved, will obviously automatically become unusual. I hope, and I think those differences and those differentiators will make great filmmakers. And they will actually begin to sort of decide how they will want to tell their stories, unlike the previous ones. Now that the formats have changed, and the people who are executing creatives are not necessarily, from backgrounds of design or backgrounds of, is also very enriching and empowering. We can actually get somebody who is an artisan from Madhya Pradesh who can actually visualize an ad for you, which could be about color, and or paint, and become successful. One of the media that I was working in was also film.
Right.
So I made lots of documentary films. And a lot of corporate films. So the excitement of making documentary films is good fun, right? I mean, you have stories to tell.
Of course.
There is unpredictability.
Yes.
There is great texture in the conversation itself. There's newness. At some point, I also thought that I should probably start to write. Once you grow up in a world like that, you want to come back and make films. Or write cinema.
Following your father's footsteps.
Following footsteps of father. Exactly. See, if you can't make film now, you always write. And I like the fact that I saw so much being written, and I also know that when I write, I live that story in my mind, right? So I'm also imagining light, I'm imagining camera, I'm imagining audio, I'm imagining effect. All of that is happening in my head, and I see it better than everybody else. So it's a time that I play God, right? With my story. The other thing that is, I think, interesting is that we always like to dream, right? सपने देखना भूलना नहीं चाहिए. मतलब in the sense that every teller of stories would want to always have something to dream about, something fun. And one of the biggest lessons, of course, is to stay rooted.
Let us tell you what we want to say. Not about just getting paid or achieving fame. It's about the everyday blood, sweat and tears, dreams and fears, everything you gotta hear. Listen, from the first steps to the final leap, making headlines in history. How they did it, it's no mystery. Take a seat, honestly. Yeah, we're creative and talkative. There's no stopping this, there's no topping this. Time for honesty with some novelty. Sit down with KT, you just hit the lottery.
Hope you had as much fun listening as we did talking. Do subscribe for updates on our upcoming episode out every Friday. Like, share and follow us on YouTube, Facebook and Instagram, as well as creativetalkative.com. That's creative with a K.